Okay, Year 12 Global Politics. Today we're going to be looking at the international laws related to human rights, and the key skill here is to be able to analyse them. So it means that you'll have to be able to talk about what's within the international law, as well as discussing the effectiveness. And usually when we're talking about the effectiveness, we can show that through how states have adhered to it and then how they have actually upheld it. So let's get into it. So the first international law that we will be looking at is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, otherwise known as CEDAW. In the exam, you have to firstly refer to it in its proper full name before you just say CEDAW. So you do need to say the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. This is often referred to as the Women's Bill of Rights, but isn't actually known in the UN as that. So the UN has created this international treaty. Then member states would have gone back to their countries and then actually, gone through that ratification process, and then, by implementing that into their laws, into the domestic laws, and then states are able to actually ratify. So it's one of the core international treaties in the UN because, it is about legal rights, and it's about legal rights for women. And that's a really important part of it. And it's obviously been, internationally and widely accepted because it has a number of parties involved. So there's 189 parties and 99 signatories. So CEDAW was actually adopted in the UN General Assembly on December 19th, 1979, and then came into force as a treaty in 1981. So it has been widely accepted, and that's shown through the number of parties involved. CEDAW provides a complete definition of sex-based discrimination. So they describe it as any kind of discrimination based on sex, which is any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of sex, which intentionally or unintentionally impairs the recognition, enjoyment, and exercise of women's social, cultural, and political and economic rights. So it's a very, they are taking a very broad-based approach on sex discrimination to basically show that they don't approve of it. And they recognize that discrimination comes for women in all forms of life. It's in cultural, can be a family, and it can also be in interpersonal relations. So you can see here there are a number of articles related to CEDAW. You don't need to know every single article, and you don't need to be able to quote every single article, but know the articles so you can link them back with responses. So if you have to talk about, the response by Australia or by Saudi Arabia to CEDAW, you need to be able to, say, this violates Article 1 or this violates Article 16 because it does this. So that's where you need to know your articles. I think in terms of the articles to know, Article 1 is good because it does define discrimination, and a number of states have, because they have ratified, they have actually got laws in place about discrimination. Another one that is good is about equal pay. That's one that's been obviously coming up more and more. Healthcare, including access to abortion. This has been obviously quite, it's been around in the news lately with America and their heartbeat in Texas, the heartbeat abortion legislation. And then with CEDAW in relation to Saudi Arabia, property ownership, the right to freely choose a spouse. I think those ones are quite important as well. Also, Article 29 says that if states want to if there is some sort of dispute, then they can take it to, Article 29 basically outlines that there's dispute resolution mechanisms if there is if there are any issues or if there are any sort of disputes. So yeah, those are probably the main ones. I'm sure that you can probably think of others that work well with your examples, but those are probably the ones that I think would fit quite well. Okay, within CEDAW, they also have the committee, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So they've obviously created their convention, but they need a body that can oversee states that have signed up to it. So there are 23 experts involved to oversee further ratifications and guide global efforts to align with CEDAW. So what they need to do is basically the committees will meet and will try to help states make sure that their legislation does align with CEDAW. They also, make sure that states actually have to report back to them to say what they have done and, how basically we can enhance the women's rights across the globe. So they do actually ask states to make reports and to outline what they have been doing to help improve women's rights. What can sometimes happen though is that, they give recommendations to states to say, we would like you to change these things in your laws. Like the CEDAW committee has met with Australia and has tried to, encourage some sort of changes to take place. And, there hasn't really been very much that's happened. In 2018, CEDAW also met with Saudi Arabia to say that, their excuse that they follow Sharia law isn't enough to actually, discriminate against women. But that did actually result in changes. So, the committee could be quite helpful in creating changes. However, for the most part, and with international law, mostly it is just a slap on the wrist. And there are no real consequences for states breaching ethics. So, the ethics really that are in the international law. So, sometimes that law can be ineffective. As I mentioned before, there is Article 29 that says that states can refer disputes they have with the standards of the committee. So, if they're not happy with what's in the, what standard has been given to them, they can actually take they can take that into action. And if they want to take it further, they can even go to the ICJ. However, there are a large number of states that have made reservations. And this is something that's controversial within CEDAW, is that states can say, we would like to make a reservation, meaning that they aren't going to comply with some parts because they have reserved that right. So, yeah, and Article 29 is under reservation as well. So the enforcement mechanism there may not be followed through with. Okay, the next one here is the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, which is CAT. CAT is basically was signed in June 1988, and it's about prohibiting all forms of torture. It came into place as of February 2021. 171 states are a party to the treaty, and there are 5 signatories. However, 21 have made no action towards the treaty. So there are some states that actually have not done anything to support that treaty. They haven't ratified, they haven't signed, and those countries include Myanmar, Papua New Guinea, and Iran. In terms of what is included in the Convention Against Torture, probably the most notable article is Article number 1, which actually outlines what torture is. Torture is any act by which severe pain or suffering is intentionally inflicted on a person, or intimidating or coercing for any reason. Article 2, state parties must take action to prevent any acts of torture in their territory. Article 3 bans non-refoulement, so people shouldn't be returned back to a country where they will be in danger. And if they, what they're saying there is that, if they are returned back, they may be in danger of and may be tortured when they return. I think also Article 15 is interesting. It says that any evidence obtained from any victim while subjected to torture or coercion will be inadmissible in legal proceedings. There are countries that do torture people in order to get a confession. The US have done that with Guantanamo Bay. The UK have also done that with enhanced interrogation techniques. And also, countries like North Korea also are using torture, and yet there's no international, there's been no punishment for that. So some people may say that that means that justice has not been achieved in these international laws. Okay, the Committee Against Torture. So the committee are the body that oversee and make sure that states are complying. So the treaty is monitored by the committee, and states have to submit a report. So every 4 years, they have to submit a report to the committee to explain how rights are being implemented. Committee members are elected for 4-year terms, and they meet annually in Geneva. The committee can also hear complaints about individuals or make complaints made by individuals. So if an individual has been tortured, they can make that complaint to the committee, which is good. Also, they have there's an optional protocol to CAT, and this has then allowed independent organisations such as Amnesty International to visit states where they have been accused of violating violating CAT. But in terms of actually any kind of legal authority here, apart from reports and encouraging states to actually implement and do the right thing, there is no real actual consequence for doing the wrong thing. States will be investigated, they will be publicly shamed if they don't adhere to the articles, but there is no legally binding consequence for doing the wrong thing. And some countries that are being accused of using torture, like North Korea, don't care much about their international reputation or being branded as a violator of human rights. So it does mean that it is difficult then to actually ensure that torture ends. CEDAW have made complaints or have investigated what's been happening in China in their re-education camps, and they have also done the same thing in North Korea. However, there hasn't been any kind of legal action taken. So, we could say that the committees show that the international community care about this issue and show that they actually want to do something about it. However, the lack of action taken and the fact that they actually can't make any kind of legal judgment may not mean that justice has been achieved. So that means that maybe that those laws aren't entirely effective. So yeah, that's really these international laws. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that gave you some insight into the laws related to human rights. You do need to know 2 of them, and then you also need to know people's, and by people I mean states' responses to these international laws. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, just let me know.